Hey, it's Stephanie. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Unwritten. I'm super excited because I have Erica here with Castner Consulting, and she's also a badass woman who has completed Ironman and other triathlons. And that, my friends, takes so much stamina and endurance. And I want to chat with you about that, of course, because how do you keep going? Is it just one step in front of the other? But we'll get to that. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Stephanie. I'm so excited we get to have this chat today.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about Castner Consulting.
Thank you so much. So, we started as a professional development brand back in 2015, helping companies and organizations communicate better with their teams. And then a little blip on the radar, AKA the spring of 2020. I don't have to go into what happened in the spring of 2020, but
Yeah.
it really shook up my business because 90% of my in person contracts and gigs, that I was having inside corporations went away. And so people weren't necessarily prepared to do things online yet. But as fate would have it, I had thought ahead and I had thought, well, there's a number of communication is communication, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's online, whether it's with our relationships. And so, how can I take those skills that I was doing inside of workplaces and transition them for people who are trying to communicate online? And so, fortunately, when COVID and all the shutdowns were happening, I pivoted my business into more communication, especially with people that are trying to connect online. And this year, of all things, it's actually my company has expanded even more, and we've opened up another sector to help couples communicate on a deeper level. So I think for the whole context of my relation or my business venture has been in building those powerful connections and communicating with confidence. It started in the workplace, but that really does transcend in all areas of our life. And I'm excited to dive into that. If you want to chat about it today, I know we're going to talk about some other things in terms of letting go and especially our expectations of things. So I'm excited
Yeah.
to see where this conversation rolls.
Yeah. So when it comes to communication, it's obviously so important. But how did you get into it? How do you have a degree in communication, or what did you want to do when you were
Yeah,
17?
that's such a fascinating question. So I actually, of all things, wanted to go into the music business. So my degree was actually in music business and graduated, went through high school, took some time off out of high school. I wasn't really emotionally ready to go to college, nor could I afford it. I was paying my entire way for college. So I worked my way to save up enough money. And when I was eventually ready to go to college, I pursued a music business degree. And my initial thought was to work in publishing. And what I found through that engagement and that experience of college is that the only way that you're going to gain things in life is by having conversations with people, like conversing. And it wasn't necessarily something I had thought about like back then, but I think looking back on it today, I'm like, oh wow, the way I communicated in college and asking questions and talking to people and finding out like what other people were working on, what their areas of focus were, and all boiled down to really building stronger communication skills. And so that built up over time. Once I graduated from college, obviously the music thing didn't work out, but but there were some opportunities for me to dive into some other communication sectors with some of the other work I was doing. And so when I eventually got the confidence to leave my 9 to 5 essentially in 2015 and start my own company, I knew that was going to be important to help especially other female leaders, get remove some of their roadblocks as it relates to communicating their strengths and communicating with more confidence and their ability to stand up for themselves and all the things that kind of go with the communication aspects with their professional goals or their personal goals as well. So it was that I would say it was an evolution. It wasn't necessarily something that I was like, oh, I'm gonna be this when I grow up, but it was definitely an evolution that stayed the course and has transformed how I do business today.
Yeah, something that just came up when you were talking about communicating and communicating outward through business and personal. It all kind of starts with how we communicate with ourselves, correct?
Oh, hell yeah. First and foremost, I don't think I would have ever left my 9 to 5 to go pursue my own business if it wasn't for me changing the conversations with myself. Like I had to have that conversation first. And I tell this story in another podcast. Maybe it's helpful for our audience to lean into this today. But one of the things that like 2 years prior to me launching my business, I kind of had a really ugly moment in my world. Like I was 6 months into a brand new marriage, and I just felt like even though it should have been the happiest time of my life, it wasn't. It was really, really chaotic. I was a new mom all of a sudden because my husband had 2 kids, and I was transitioning in a lot of other ways in my personal world, but I didn't know how to communicate at the time. I didn't know how to communicate those changes around me, and how that was going to intersect with all the other things that I was doing in my professional career. And so I had a lot of messy moments in that time. And I had to, the only way that was going to change for me was to get like that professional help on my end to change those internal conversations I was having, being able to say, okay, like, yeah, I'm the stepmom, but it's my household. And so I have to be able to say things and, and communicate in a way. I was really, really bashful about that. But like, that experience really kind of catapulted me into some other opportunities to help women explore their own communication. If I hadn't had that lapse or that messy moment in my life, I know I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So yeah, you're spot on with changing those conversations internally first, and then you can have the freedom and the flexibility to go outward.
And when you're working with companies, do you find the same thing that you have to first change their internal structure, how they communicate, and then
Well,
outward or
yeah,
no?
it depends on what their goals are, what their initiatives are. But a lot of times, organizations, it's usually the upper management that's wanting to bring in or like that support and that help. And people, if they're not bought into that, if they don't feel like, oh my goodness, like there's maybe some opportunity for me to grow my communication skills, that's an internal message that they're saying to themselves, right? Like, oh, I'm not part of the problem. I don't need the help. I don't need the support. But we all need that support. I mean, I do this stuff for a living, but I still invite that support into my world. Like I don't just be like, okay, I'm at a certain level now and now I'm good. Like I'm constantly working on improving my communication skills because the things that trigger us throughout our lives in terms of how we react to things, how we communicate with other people, how we interact with past situations and how that's showing up today, like those things still come up in our future, but they don't like and so we might have the skills and the tools, but they're still going to come up. So it's just being able to I still have to have those check-ins. I still have to have that support system around me to help elevate my communication skills so I can be a better leader for other people that are seeking that out.
Yeah. And how about when a company or even, let's say me, let's say I'm a photographer and I want to improve my communication with my clients online, face to face. It's great. I get them on the phone, but what are some of the first steps that you kind of walk through with your customers? And is it an assessment or how do you kind of help people?
Yeah. So let's talk about you for a second. So like in your world, like where do you feel like if you said online, where do you feel like you need to elevate the communication online? Like what's the specific uh like goal that you have in mind to elevate that communication online?
Sure. Well, my website, I have like terrible conversion rates on my website. So I focus, of course, because that's my weakest link. I focus on my brand on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn. So I kind of it's like you know, it's the shadow in the room.
Okay. So like the communication outward is your social media, and then you're trying to get people back to your website so they land on there and then they learn about your work and then they ultimately book you. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, my website, the people that come to my website usually don't know me, and
Yeah.
I get the majority of my work through messaging and word of mouth, and you know, uh,
Yeah, so same. Yeah, same. So, I'm glad you're bringing this up because I think for a lot of people, they go into this like assumption, and business owners especially, and anybody that's trying to build an online brand, they go into this assumption that the only way they're going to get clients is through social media. And like you said right now, I've been a lot of word of mouth referrals. And so sometimes it can really just be a matter of like, what is the story that's coming out of your mouth? Like, how are you communicating to other people, like your brand story, the values that you want to implore and want to share with other people that you stand behind. I mean, I don't necessarily think we have to get so deep on this today,
No, we don't. I'm
but
just
you know, it's
curious.
really just. But if it helps your audience, I am so for it. But it's really just about like being able to talk those things out loud, and you know, sometimes not. I don't want to say sometimes your website and your web presence and digital presence for anybody is like it should be a reflection of what you would say in real life. It shouldn't be like something entirely different. So if you would never say certain things online in real life, like why is that, you know, why would that information be on your website? Not at you, Stephanie, but anybody who's
No,
listening to this conversation right now,
yeah.
you know, think about the way you talk to people, think about the way that you interact with your friends. And if you want to create a brand that's really more about inviting people in because you want them to be friends with you, like don't talk to them like quote unquote professionally online, like in the sense of, you know, being all buttoned up and not friendly and, you know, robotic, you know, talk like you would online. And there's a lot of other strategies I could go into. We won't have time to do that today, but, you know, really just like at the end of the day, it's how do you interact like with regular people in your life, and how do you want your brand to show up, and how do you want it to stand out? Because if that's, you know, if you're thinking about that and that's first and foremost, everything else, your social media presence, your website copy, your email copy, like all of that stuff will start coming together because you're true to what you actually say in your words.
Yeah. It makes total sense. I think with how I started, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially moms, started was, okay, I'm gonna get a website. Okay, I'm gonna get a LLC. I'm gonna do like these specific things. And even as businesses grow and we grow, there's always that piece that you have to get through of like, okay, no, this is. It, I guess I don't know how to explain it other than you're building a website, you have no freaking idea what you're doing, but you know you need it. And that piece is always it seems like it's always there. It's like, oh shoot, there's that thing. There's that thing I need to do and I don't
Yeah.
know what I'm doing. And communication, it seems so obviously we're born and we speak, and it kind of it's so simple that it gets overlooked, correct?
Yeah, for sure. It totally does. And you know, when you're overthinking it, sometimes I think that can get people in a lot of trouble because they're to the point where they just are so bogged down with what it should quote unquote look like. And it's like if you just let that go, if you say, you know, how do I want to show up? Like what do I want people to feel when they're around me? And like this is like this is kind of maybe broadening our topic just a little bit, Stephanie, but like even beyond your brand, like how do I want my peeps, my family, my friends, my intimate partners, like how do I want them to feel when I open my mouth? How do I want them to feel when they just see me standing there? Because your body is, you know, the way you talk and the tonality of your voice is all part of that communication plan. So, you know, just it takes time, it takes practice. It's not I'm talking about it today kind of all over the place, and I can because I study it, but
Yeah.
like there was once upon a time where I couldn't even stutter out my own name in a confidence setting room because I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed with that. So it does take time, it does take practice. And you know, there's lots of other people out there. You know, I would like to throw myself into that mix, but there are other people out there that are communication experts. And so if anybody's struggling with it right now, reach out, you know, seek those communication specialists out because, you know, they could be giving you some tips on how to elevate and shine in your own brand. So don't feel like you have to do it all alone. For our listeners out there who are in that spot right now, don't feel like you have to figure that out by yourself. There's people out there that can help you with that.
And so speaking of which, who are your ideal customers? Who do you like to help the most, or is there one?
Yeah. Thank you for that. So basically, people that are in the service professional space. So they're either business owners that are like industry focused, obviously photographers, realtors, attorneys, people that have a service that they offer that is something that is it speaks well to what I do because again, a lot of people I would like to look at it this way, Stephanie. A lot of people that are in industries where there's a lot of other people in their industry. So you think about other coaches, other photographers, like we are, right? Respectively, there's so many other people doing what we do, and so ideally, since I started this evolution of my brand online, it's really helped me dive into like how I can help those people stand out. And and it's not so much about like I know we're talking a lot about the words, but I don't know if we're catching this like for anybody that's listening and paying attention, but like it's really more about how do people feel around you? How do you create that vibe? How are you creating that energy and that ecosystem of inviting people and clients and prospects into your world and referral partners into your world as well. So anybody, like I said, service providers, people that are in industries that where there's a lot of other people that are swimming in a similar space, those seem to be my ideal clients. And then we figure out what is it that they want to work out with their communication, and then we figure out from there what's that plan or what's that strategy that's going to help them get there faster and more efficiently.
Okay, so now here comes the fun question. How do you how do you translate your business and the growth of your business to Ironman, and how does it all kind of feed you? And are they similar?
So yes and no, because I look at it this way. So both in business and then anything that you're going to tackle as it relates to something like an Ironman competition. So for our listeners who don't know what Ironman is, Ironman is a full distance triathlon. They do have half distance triathlons, but to be considered an Ironman, you've got to complete a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, followed by a full marathon, a 26.2 mile run. And you've got to do that less than 17 hours in most cases. I finished my first one in 16 hours, 41 minutes, and 30 seconds. Who's counting? But I was one of the back of the bus crew. I was one of the slower athletes. There's other people that finish it faster. But to answer your question, Stephanie, so I always equate that experience of completing Ironman to business in the sense of you have to have a vision. So like for me, I couldn't have just rolled out of bed one day and said, oh, I'm going to be an Ironman. In fact, for like the first 40 some years of my life, I didn't believe that I could even tie my shoes, let alone, I mean, I couldn't, but like I always wore like slip on heels. And I was like, okay, there's not athletic bone in my body. Like I'm not even like my feet repel tennis shoes. Like it doesn't work. And it wasn't until I challenged that belief, because my second thing, you have to have people around you that are going to tell you, hell yes, you can do that. Like that's awesome. And so for one, I had to have the vision for myself. Two, I had to have people around me that were saying, hell yes, we're gonna do this. Like you got this. Like, and hold me accountable and show up on days that I didn't want to show up and train. The third thing, I had to have a plan. I had to know like what was my game plan to train for that moment and that epic moment. And then the fourth thing I had to have was I had to show up. I had to do the work. I had to like, even on days that I was not feeling like training, I still had to show up and do that training to the best of my ability for that day, because that meant that those training hours were going to, they were going to help me cross the finish line and that goal. So going back to business, if there's so many of us that are just like, oh, I'll take, whatever client, and I'm not focused on that. Like, whatever client comes my way, I'll take it. And they don't know how to talk. They don't know how to ask for what they want. They don't know how to spell that out. So getting clear on some level, you don't have to like that vision can change. Like my vision once upon a time was to do 5 Ironmans by the time I was 50. I've changed that vision. I might get 2 more in, which would be 3 by the time I'm 50. I might even change that even more. But the point is you have to have some sort of end result. You have to have some sort of goal in mind. And you have to have people around you that will tell you, hell yes, you could do this. If you're in business right now and you get a bunch of people around you that have no idea what you're doing, no idea what you're trying to grow, who are all telling you that you suck or you're going to fail or that's not going to work, like it doesn't mean you have to divorce those people, but you do have to break off your like communication with them on some level and go find yourself some people that will cheer you on and say, you know what, that's a really ambitious goal. but I am totally here to help you with that. And whatever you need help with, like, I am here to cheer you on. So you still have to show up and do the work, right? Like, you can't just be like, well, I just, everybody's cheering me on and that's going to make it happen. Like, I'm not doing all the work. You still have to do the work, but that's, that it's so equates with business and anything, like even relationships. I mean, my own marriage. I mean, I've been married now to my husband for almost 12 years. And I feel like, there's still, what's the vision for our marriage? Are we surrounding ourselves with other couples that are like, who we want to, not that we want to be like, but that are thriving and that are working on goals and that are doing kick-ass things? Like, are we surrounding ourselves with those people? And are we showing up and doing the work? Like, are we actually committed to the things that are going to help save our marriage? So that formula can fit into any area of your life. But you just have to be able to plug that in and let some of the other BS go. I mean, because there's a lot of things that kind of hold us back, and it's very simple. You vision, people, the plan, and execute. Like, it's so simple, but people get so bogged down with all the crap, and they forget the simplicity of it. So
Right. And then it kind of goes back to that very first thing we talked about. It really starts with your mindset and
yeah,
how you
yeah,
talk to yourself and the things that you think about. And what do you dwell on during the day? Do you dwell on success and positivity, or do you dwell on, that person that said something to you 5 years ago, which, we're all, it does happen to all of us, but it is making
yeah.
that mental choice of like, oh, okay, why am I thinking about this? It's a beautiful day out and I have 6 things I need to focus on. And, it's all about mindset. Sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. I have you read the book? It's a newer book by Adam Grant, and it's called Hidden Potential. Have you read it yet?
No, I'm going to write it down.
Awesome. Hidden Potential. It's by Adam Grant. I'm currently reading it right now, and there was a quote in there the other day, and I like got on a page that I was on, and I like wrote that down because I was like, that is so profound. But I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was something along the lines of, too many people are the custodians of their past instead of being the stewards of their future. So they're like they're ruminating in the past. They're like thinking about all the, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, or they're surrounding themselves with people that are like just, living in the past, and they're not doing anything to progress in the future. And it's like, wait, all control that. I mean, yeah, there's shitty circumstances that come up in our world that can stop us and get us off track, but it's up to us to be like, okay, how are we the stewards of our future? How do we steer the ship? How do we get ourselves into the right vision? How do we get ourselves around the right people? How do we get ourselves into action based on the things that are the action steps that are going to get us to our finish line faster? So yeah, just making sure that we're following that and like letting go of past grievances or things that just no longer serve you is so vital. I wouldn't have been able to have any successes in my world, and I'm not all that about potato chips, but I would not have been able to if I was just like clinging on to. Let's go back to Ironman for a second. If I was just clinging on to um well, like nobody else thinks, everybody used to make fun of me because I, don't know how to throw a ball, or I don't know how to run, or I don't know how, whatever. If I held on to all of those belief systems, I wouldn't have been able to cross the finish line when I did. And so that goes for any aspect of our life and business.
Yeah. Back to Adam Grant. He's written other books, I believe. And the
Yeah.
name, I think I've read some of his books, are A Book. And yeah, the idea that so what came to mind when you were talking was when I went through my second divorce, and I didn't know, there's so many unknowns in that. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know if my business was going to sustain me. I didn't know what people are going to think. I didn't know what my stepkids were going to think, all that stuff. And the only vision I had in my head, because I was in Santa Barbara at the time, was a boat, and just letting it go, undoing the rope that makes it stuck onto a pier, and just let it go. And I just had this vision, and it was so peaceful, of just the ship just sailing out to sea. And it gave me so much calm because I was no longer stuck. And I
Mhm.
think it's a really important thing to talk about, because when we are so stuck on holding on to all the things that we thought made us us, like I couldn't tie my shoes, or my mom told me I was too chubby to dance, or whatever. When we
Right.
let all that go, all of a sudden it's peaceful. And when it's peaceful, you can see, and you can see the future, and you can make the goals, and you can write it out. And when you're in that flow and in that vibe, all of a sudden the people that you need in your life come to you. But you have to
Yeah.
let that go.
Yeah. You know, to that point, Stephanie, it's almost like, you know, thinking about when you make the decision to let things go, like, and for a lot of us, it's easier said than done, right? You know,
Yep.
because once we have to go through and actually, you know, cut that metaphoric rope off and sail away on onto the sea, that can be very scary and unexpected. But when we make when we draw the line in the sand, we make the decision to say, you know what, I'm no longer letting XYZ stand in my way to, like, you know, hold me back, and we make that decision to cut it off. What ends up happening is like it's letting go of one thing, but it's inviting possibility and opportunity for other things to come in that didn't have room before. Like there's no way, like if you're clutching, and then this is like, you know, physically, metaphorically, like I like to relate it as like the you know how people when they come over to your house like unexpectedly and like there's maybe clutter on your kitchen counter, what do? You throw all of that shit in a drawer, right? Because you're just like, I don't want company to see that I, you know, live kind of like messy. I mean, you know, we all do, right? We throw it into this junk drawer and we never go back to it, right? We just throw it all in there. Well, what eventually happens when the sixth time somebody comes over and we're just throwing more stuff in the junk drawer? Eventually that stuff is going to come out. Eventually it's going to like creep out of the doorway, and it's going to, you know, creep out of the cupboard, like wherever you're shoving that stuff, because it has nowhere else to go. And so, like, if you are like clearing that out, now you can say, okay, well, now I need my pens to go in here. I need some other things. You know, like now you can actually like organize it in a way that's going to give you, you know, the things that you need versus like just having all that clutter like trapped up. So I like to that I loved how you talked about the, you know, cutting the rope and you know sailing away and actually getting away from that. But like I find that the metaphor junk drawer too, you know, people can think about like, you know, what's in your junk drawer right now, in your metaphoric like mind junk drawer right now, what do you need to clear out of there so you can make room for awesome stuff to come your way.
Yeah. And when someone's making the decision to clear away the clutter, they realize they need help. What do you think it is that you offer people that helps them see the benefit or the vision of what their life could look like? Does that make sense to you as far as the question?
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me personally, I've one is accountability, right? I mean, I think anybody in my position, I think anybody in a career path, you know, if you're going to be the leader in your industry, there is some level of accountability. Like whether it's the communication you have with your clients, there's deadlines, you know, like I'm sure in your world, Stephanie, with being a photographer, like you have expectations. Like the photo shoot isn't going to like turn out if these things aren't done, right? So like there's this level of like accountability and expectation. I think as a service provider, we have to come through on, but that could translate into our relationships, that could translate into our hobbies, anything that we're like, it's that expectation and that accountability. I think the other thing that sets me apart and what I have found over my years, that has really helped me kind of lead into like my superpower is being able to be an amazing listener and ask a lot of questions. So if you can like invite yourself to get into as many conversations like a day, like in this let's put it into the business context, for instance. So if like somebody that's listening to this right now and their number one goal is to get more clients or to get more word of mouth referrals, well, the only way that that's going to happen is if we actually have conversations with people and tell people, hey, this is what I'm looking for. These are the types of clients I'm looking for. What are you working on right now? How can I serve you and support you in your areas of focus? And you're obviously sharing what you need help with, but you're also getting that from somebody else. You're retrieving that information from them. So the next time you have a conversation with somebody else, now all of a sudden, like you're thinking back and you're like, oh, you know what? Erica and I were just talking about the other day. Do you know Erica? Like, let me connect you with Erica. She was just talking about that thing yesterday. And like we had a conversation. I'm gonna put the two of you together. So like for me, I've been really like it's a skill that I had to build. Like I used to be really scared of talking in front of big groups of people and like talking to strangers. Like that wasn't something that I did. But like if you could just get really good at like asking questions of other people, before you know it, like that makes you super resourceful in your industry because you all of a sudden have a lot of intel, a lot of information. You know what other people are working on, you know what they need help with. And so if you're always asking those questions, you can always kind of tie those threads. Like the person you meet tomorrow, if they need that connection of somebody you met last week, you can always tie that together. And that person is always, those people, I should say, are always going to be connected because of you. And like that shouldn't be the only main reason why you're connecting people, but like make that your superpower. There's not enough people in any industry that are doing that thing, that are being of service, that are asking enough questions, that are getting to know other people and get curious about that. So I challenge anybody that's listening to this, if that's a goal of yours, is to put more referrals in your pipeline. You get to know your community, get to know like other service providers in your industry who might be able to refer you business. Get really good at making connections with people, asking questions, finding out how you can support them, because you're going to have an opportunity to share with them how they can support you. But you got to be open to that communication as well.
Yeah, and I like the word you ended on was communication.
Yeah,
it all boils down to communication. From the start of this to towards the end of this is communicate, get out there and show your face. Correct? Like you gotta love who you are and love what you do, and you have to be able to share that excitement and that energy with people. I know for me, when you were talking, I just had this idea of, getting together with women and talking about your dreams. And
yeah,
it can be whatever it is in your heart that you feel or you get a vision of or you seek, and just having that, the first steps into making that happen and kind of making it on your own terms as well. So if you're not interested in 7 p.m. networking at a bar, maybe you're interested at 9 a.m. coffee or a book club or the whatever. There's so many different ways to reach out.
Yeah. And you know what? We all have that power. I'm glad that you brought that up, Stephanie, because we all have that power as service providers and business owners, especially if we own our own business, and or even if you don't own your own business, but you are, building your book of business, because, you might be a realtor or you might be a financial planner. So you are like, you're under the umbrella of like whatever organization you work for, but like you still run your referrals. Like if you don't, get more about word of mouth referrals, you don't get paid. So like I'm speaking to y'all right now. So like you could go create your own networking event. You could go create your own coffee chat. You can invite like 4 or 5 people that you already know and do exactly what Stephanie just suggested with, hey, what are you dreaming about right now? What are you scheming about right now? Like what can we do to help support you in where you're at right now? And I find that, you don't have to have like Oprah style like goals to make that effective. Like it can really just be a matter of saying, you know what, I want to meet 5 new people this month. Like that could be your dream right now. It doesn't have to be anything massively huge. So just starting where you're at and just calling it and saying, look, I want to create that for myself. I want to surround myself with 4 other women, let's just say, every single month, and I want to connect and check in with them and just find out what we're working on, how we can support each other. If that's a goal of yours, then do it now. Could it grow into something where you're supporting 400 women from a year from now, absolutely. But start where you are and invite those conversations where you're at right now. Don't wait for it to be big enough or, like up to somebody else's standards. Like start where you are right now because it'll grow based on your level of activity.
Yeah. Like a gardening club. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a million different
There's
things
so
you
many
could
things.
do.
Yeah, there's so many things you could do. I just
Yeah.
started, I think Stephanie, I think you and I were talking about this like the last time you and I had a chat, but I just started something in my community called Chicks and Charcuterie. I mean, I don't do charcuterie boards as a profession, but I know how to make one. I know how to make a grazing table. And I'm like, you know what? I want to just invite rat ass chicks that are like doing amazing things and that just want to like get to know each other. And so I did. Like I just said, you know what? I'm going to put it together. The first, 15 people that want to come over and do it, like and hang out, you're invited. And so like it doesn't have to be anything massive. It can just be having a gathering at your house. But do something. If you're
Yep.
in that place right now where you're feeling like you can't, you can. You're just not like challenging yourself to do it and maybe buddy up with somebody to help you on that accountability side, get those connections and get that communication rock and rolling.
Yeah, and it's okay to be uncomfortable, right? Like
Oh yeah.
that's the self-talk again. It's gonna be
Yeah.
uncomfortable to ask people to do things, but you have to.
Yeah,
Yep.
because anything would like this is gonna sound so cliche when I say this, but anything worth like having is gonna be uncomfortable AF. Like it is going to be so uncomfortable to get to that level of oh gosh, like I and like getting up at 4 o'clock, going back to Ironman for a second. Does anybody really want to get up at like 4 o'clock? And actually, I was starting at like my long rides. I would have to start like at 4 o'clock in the morning, which meant I'd have to get up at 3 o'clock to eat and to go potty and do all the things in order to be prepped to go out on a 7 hour bike ride starting at 4 o'clock in the morning because nobody wants to be in the Florida sun, right? But
Yeah.
that's uncomfortable. But you have to do those things. It doesn't have to be at that level, but you got to stretch yourself in order to accomplish those things on a bigger level.
Yeah. So how can people, because this has been so wonderful, how can people find you and possibly work with you? Because I think that you have so much to offer so many women on so many different platforms. We talked about realtors, accountants, lawyers, photographers, because we're all in that same boat of how do we stand out? How do we get the not only clients, but the right clients?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the easiest way to stay in touch with me is going to be over at ericacastner.com/stand out. And so if anybody goes there, ericacastner.com/stand out, there's actually a free guide that I've created for your audience staff, which is going to be helping them be unforgettable and be top of mind and stand out in their industry. So if they want to go there and check it out, that's a good place to start. It's a really comprehensive way for people to kind of dive into some of the things that I'm doing, but they get it for free and they get some really good tips on how to stand out in their industry.
Okay, that's awesome. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap things up? Is there anything that kind of came up when I was talking or you were talking that just didn't quite make it to the
To the
recording?
chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for anybody that's listening, and you're listening to Stephanie and I chat today, it like everything that you want is on the other side of a conversation. And if you can just remember that, like your conversations, they might start off small, but like those small conversations that you have daily, if you're committed to that on a daily basis, that's going to compound into something that'll be incredible for you. Like I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I wasn't committed to doing tiny steps every single day. I didn't focus on doing massive steps every once in a while. I'm like, okay, what can I do that's going to give me a little step today, little step tomorrow, little step the next day in any aspect that I want to improve. So I think for our listeners today, if you just focus on what is that little tiny action step you can take today towards your business growth, towards improving your relationships, towards training for an Ironman, if that's your thing. Like, what's that tiny step you can take today and then tomorrow and the next day and continue that so you can eventually compound your results and cross that finish line faster?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And just keep going. You don't know where it's going to
Yeah.
lead.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Stephanie. You rock, my friend.
Thank you. You too.